If you're new here, you may be wondering, how did we get here in the first place? Who am I? How did I come to own this online coaching business that helps hundreds of men get in the shape of their lives? Who was I before I was educating other coaches and fitness professionals? Where did I come from in terms of getting pretty jacked and shredded? Well, I wanted to break down my full physique timeline, the entire transformation and journey from nearly 9 years ago when I first stepped into the gym. And it all actually starts before I stepped into the gym, my upbringing, because I wasn't someone that it came easy to. This was a big lifestyle change. I was always raised academically, and as a result, as a kid, I was always pretty out of shape. I was actually pretty tubby. This is us on a family holiday, and the funny thing is because I'm Portuguese, I spent a lot of time at the beach, and therefore I actually, from a young age, was really insecure about how I looked. Other kids who were pushed a little bit more sporty and active, they all had way better bodies than me. And it also taught me the valuable lesson that if you want to achieve something, not much beats just consistently showing up, even if it ain't perfect. Over years, you will overtake everyone if you consistently show up. But my parents were immigrants. I was always pushed very hard academically as a result of that. It was this, idea of we've come to this new place. You're going to work hard. We come from nothing. You go to school, go to uni, get a good job. All the typical kind of come up stuff. So that's what was always drilled to me. I was always very academically pushed. I wasn't raised very active, and I certainly wasn't genetically naturally gifted with a good body. I was very low in muscle mass, and even when I then started to look after my diet a little bit more, as I went through puberty, I went through a little bit of a growth spurt. I finally started to pay attention to my diet because, as I said, I was always actually quite self-conscious about my body. I didn't really have the faintest idea about nutrition, so I was literally eating salads all day, and coupled with me growing and going through puberty, that meant that I then got quite skinny fat, I should say. I was never like paper thin skin level ripped. I didn't really have abs. I didn't have much muscle either. And this was actually me like pumped up. I'd started dabbling with some bodyweight exercises at this point, so even when I'd sort of grown a little bit, this wasn't even as bad as I looked. I wish I still had more pictures with my top off from around then, but I didn't have abs. I had no muscle. Even this little shadow on my shoulder here is really just the fact that I was doing some side raises in the gym in this hotel prior to going out to the pool in a bid to actually look the way I wanted, and I just didn't know any better. And things kind of stayed the same for the next year, progressing maybe the tiniest bit before I finally got into the gym. So I finally got a gym membership. I convinced my parents that was something that I really wanted to do, and I found the opportunity to bolt on to one of my schoolmates' parents' memberships. They were kind enough to let me bolt on, so I got in a little bit cheaper. My parents wouldn't have paid for a gym membership for me otherwise. And when I was 15, I started training in the gym. And I started off with, the usual bro split. I was a big fan of the Gymshark guys back then, Jeff Side. So it was, chest and triceps, bench press, 4 sets of 10, all the stuff that I now know doesn't really work. And as a result, I made some noob gains. What I did have was some intensity. I went in with passion. I wanted to get the body of my dreams. And a year later, I had some noob gains. I bulked up, as you can see. I was pretty fluffy. That was my back, and from the front, I looked pretty horrendous. I tidied up a little bit for the summer, and this is how I looked after my first year of lifting. I had a little bit better abs, but I was still very skinny. I wasn't lean either. But for a year of dedicating myself to it, it wasn't the worst starting point. At this point for my age, I looked all right. And in okay lighting, yeah, I was still quite skinny fat. I wasn't really lean. Still had that little lower belly pouch. Didn't have much muscle, particularly on my shoulders and arms. My chest got off to an okay start though. Definitely not the upper chest. But that was me after a little over a year in the gym. Then we come to college. And this was cool because it was, just me having a lot more time to focus on my fitness, something that I now realize was an important learning curve for when I inevitably actually came to fail, because you're not in college forever. You're going to have more in life going on. If you're in the gym, if you're watching this, then I'm hoping you're an ambitious, motivated guy. You're trying to do things in all areas. You probably want the dream job. You want to be jacked. You want an incredible partner to support you. you want to fuel a good relationship, you want it all. I'm hoping that's the, if you're fucking with my vibe, then that's hopefully who you are as well. But long story short, I still hadn't quite figured out this gym stuff. I did start to let my training do a little bit more of the talking, so I got a little bit less fat than last time. But eventually, I was a little bit fluffy again, cut down for summer, and again, just bit by bit, we made some improvements. Now, what I'm looking at here is just something that just wasn't going to work very well for me, because again, this was a time in my life where I was just loving my training. I was in the gym for hours a day, 6 days a week. And as you can tell, I hadn't quite locked down the exercise selection side of things, because boy, oh boy, my legs look terrible over there. But this was me starting to think outside the box, thinking, right, okay, I'm plateauing. This stuff doesn't come easily to me. I got to figure out what I'm actually doing with this. And that leads us into no, that doesn't. That leads us nicely into year 3, where things basically stayed more or less the same. I did get a little bit more lean through that time. I finally got abs for the first time, but I didn't really take any steps forward with my physique. I did, however, start delving into sort of science-based lifting a little bit more, figuring out like, right, what actually grows muscle? But the problem is, at that time, the sources that were available weren't really that great. So I picked up a lot of bad advice. I was just focused on doing more in the gym, rather than using the science to make something stupid simple. So I was reading those papers that were like, yeah, 52 sets, the more the better, etc. It creates more growth. But in reality, what I should have been doing was actually learning the fundamentals, learning exercise mechanics, so I could figure out how to pick better exercises to actually grow those damn legs. Learning how to create a simple, efficient approach around my diet, because what would happen is that I would end up leaving college. I got the dream job, but everything kind of went to pot. I was in a really, really bad place in my life. That job, even though it would be some people's dream, it really wasn't doing it for me. I had a lot of bad relationships at the time. I was just stressed. I had no purpose. And as a result of that, I was just, losing a lot of what I'd worked really hard to gain. At this point, I'm literally 3 and then 4 years respectively into lifting, and I've literally got a skinny fat build, and I look like I've never really been to the gym, which isn't ideal. Working didn't help with that, because I was launched into adulthood. We're talking that I'm 18 years old here. I'm living on my own. I'm doing everything from, my cooking and cleaning, but obviously I'm working 9 to 5. On top of that, I'm doing a full uni degree as well. So it was just a pretty hectic lifestyle, and that's what my ambition earned me. And this is where a lot of people go wrong. People will be so focused on their careers that they will really start to neglect their health, and it'll start to show. But then as we then came into, COVID times, then things just got progressively worse, and I literally had like zero muscle. I looked absolutely awful. But it was through this time, through this super busy time, that I started to now think, well, what I was doing isn't working for me anymore. The influencer workouts, the magazine workouts, the bro workouts, it's good if you're one of the genetic few who's really, really lucky, but what if you're a normal guy? What if you're an ambitious guy who wants it all, who's, chasing the career, but also wants to be jacked, and you're tired of, either your fitness impacting your career or your career impacting your fitness? And that's where I started to dig into the science a little bit more, figure out like, right, okay, what actually grows muscle? What is going to be a simple solution for me to nail my nutrition and burn body fat? And that's how I started to piece together the approach that I now bring to my clients. And this is where I started, therefore, coaching, because I really then started to dig deep. This was me at my absolute worst in 2021. You can see at this point, I'm like 5 years into lifting, as embarrassing as that is. And I just looked absolutely atrocious. I was in my early days of coaching at this point, but everything was starting to just get on top of me. And that's where I knew that I needed to really take back control. So I really started putting these principles into play. I slowly kind of leaned down and gained a bunch of muscle. I bulked up, and this was kind of the bodybuilder era. I was basically finding this approach of, hard but science-based, taking the best of the best, because that's really what I've kind of learned. I've trained with professional bodybuilders, I've done the degree. So my thing was like, how can I create the actual just best approach out there that works for people, because it's so predictable. It uses the stuff that is just super, super effective. I seem to have lost myself. Where am I going? There we go. Cool. So what that ended up leading to was then me deciding to pursue the bodybuilding thing a little bit seriously, really dial in and get my physique on point. So from there, I actually shredded down. I'm 6 years deep into lifting at this point, and I finally kind of look like it. So I shredded down for a bodybuilding show. This was me 100% drug-free and natural a few weeks out. That was me 4 weeks out in Portugal, finally rocking my dream beach body. I remember taking this photo and finally thinking, damn, I've done it. It took some graft, but it was all worth it. And that's the kind of physique that I now comfortably roll with because of the methods that I set up. That was me a few days out from the bodybuilding show, and then that was, you know, what exactly I achieved. I shredded down into crazy shape. I was shredded. I finally had that muscle. I did a photo shoot for the first time, and that was all 100% drug-free as well. I wanted to remain drug-free for as long as possible so that I didn't have to rely on anything except my knowledge on training and nutrition to make some great progress so that I could actually transfer that to my clients. But within my personal journey, when this box had been ticked off and that itch had been ignited to really take things to the next level, I started using anabolic steroids at that point. I make no attempt to hide that. And coupled with my knowledge, I blew up. I got big. I was nearly 200 pounds, fairly lean, still had a little bit of an outline of abs, and I was big. I was strong, and I was just making the most of, a little bit of something on top of the approach that I'd crafted, and it worked incredibly, incredibly well. That summer, I then kind of did, just a little bit of a diet. I was really just focused on growing at this point, and I got pretty damn beefy until I got around to then my second prep in 2024, when I then really dialed in and got absolutely lean. I did a bunch more photo shoots here, and I actually bailed out of this prep a few weeks out from my bodybuilding show because I just wasn't in the right place for it. A lot had changed in my life. My business had really started to take shape, and I could see the impact that I was having on others. And that was something that I just really wanted to dial in on. And especially as I also met my fiance, I started thinking a little bit longer and harder about what I really wanted out of my life and bringing things full circle to create this business where I'm helping people like that were in my shoes finally get the body that they deserve, finally cut through the bullshit, finally be able to stick to a program that works around their lifestyle, finally actually get the results they deserve for sticking to a program. And now I'm basically a little bit smaller and not quite as shredded as I was on these photos, but I did just do my first photo shoot of the year today, so I can't wait to see the end result of that. And I'm looking forward to continuing to progress my physique, continuing to learn so that I can help countless men achieve exactly the same. If you guys enjoyed, I hope you'll leave a like and subscribe, of course, for more content to help you achieve the pinnacle, and I'll catch you in the next video. Cheers.